Good Sunday morning, and welcome to OpenLine Online.
Got a
Here,
little echo.
Sunday, October 13th. I know that we have a little echo going on, but what else is new if we don't have something going on
Sounds like
in
rap
this place?
back in the day, man.
Yeah,
You know,
I tell
the
you,
rap.
hip,
The
hop,
reverb.
the
We
hip,
got
it,
the
the hip, it,
reverb.
the reverb. So it's always, let me ring the bell for that one.
Use the echo chamber, brother. Echo chambers.
You know, it's a good Sunday morning out here in New York City. The weather's great, and we have a lot to discuss, so let's get in here. Let me introduce the panel. We have our regular crew here, minus one or two. Sitting right to my right is, from the New York Amsterdam News, Jamie Harris. Good morning, brother Jamie.
Good morning, family. Good morning.
Next to him is the other half of the Sports Brothers, Bobby Childs. Good morning, brother Bobby.
Good morning for team. And it was interesting on the radio side. You opened up with sports in honoring Bob Slade. I like that one there, right? With the Major League Baseball playoffs afoot, and Yankees with a big win last
His
night.
beloved Yankees.
So Bob lives on, everybody. Bob
There you
lives
go.
on.
And if you notice, what do I have on it?
Got your Yankees, that's right.
That's what Bob Slade would be
That's
doing,
right.
right?
Absolutely.
Bob trained me very well, trust me. All right, sitting over on the couch there, relaxing, is
By
brother
himself.
by himself.
I got the cooties.
We'll get a cardboard cutout of Netta, one of the big heads, and we'll put it right over there until she arrives.
brother protest, Larry Ham. Good morning, brother Larry.
Good morning. I want to give a shout out to a black man, Eliud Kipchoge from Kenya. From Kenya, became the first person in the history of mankind to break the 2-hour barrier in the marathon. He ran 26.2 miles yesterday in Vienna, Austria, in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds.
Incredible.
A superhuman feat. And I'm just, beside myself with joy, but at the same time, I'm a little jaded because I just feel because a black man achieved this, it's really not getting the attention it deserves. I mean, it's in the news, but it's like page 8. It's not page 1. And believe me, if it had been a European or someone else white who had done this, we couldn't have turned on the television this morning without seeing footage from the race.
Yeah, I mean, there's a doctor.
Whoa. Because Larry, from now on, I'm going to introduce you last. Because I haven't finished introducing the crew yet.
Right.
And he goes in here and starts. Let me
That's right, that's right.
Our legal analyst, attorney, and former judge, Bob Pickett, joins us this morning. Good morning, brother. Pickett, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well, my friend. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that the folks out there are having an opportunity to hear us discuss the issues further.
There you go.
So,
Brother
so
Bobby.
just back to Kipchoge, right? So it's a human marvel, right? And there are doctors who are trying to determine what the body can endure, what's the the outer limits of physical performance, and he is coming close. By many studies, they believe to run that distance. They believe the human body, as it's understood today, can do 1 hour 57 minutes. He did 1 hour 59, but as you pointed out, he was waving to his wife and the crowd. He had let up during the last, 100 yards or so.
Right.
Yeah. And as former sprinters, Bobby and I, you are the distance runner,
That's
Larry.
right.
You have run several marathons, and having covered probably 25 marathons myself over the years. I've always found it to be incredible.
Wait, hold on. He covered. You ran.
You
He
ran.
covered.
That's how,
There's a difference.
I mean, like I said, we were the sprinters. But, and it is a truly, as you pointed out, Bobby, what the human body can do. It's just an amazing, amazing feat. And again, as someone who's run the marathon, Larry, you know how the New York City Marathon, you know how difficult and challenging that is.
Yeah.
And for that brother to keep the pace that he kept is just, it's mind-boggling.
He ran 4 minutes and 34 seconds per mile for 26 miles. Today, a 4 minute and 34 second mile, if you just ran 1 mile, would be the first place time in like a high school or even a college meet. He did 26 of those. It's just, and when you look at the splits, He hit the first 5,000 meters in like 14 minutes. 5,000 meters is 3 miles.
Yes.
The first 3 miles was in 14 minutes. He hit the 10,000 meters in 28 minutes. He ran the first six in 28 minutes. It was a superhuman
And let me just make this
achievement.
last point, 15. You know, in the early 20th century, one of the great barriers, as you know, Larry and Bobby, in track and field was breaking the 4-minute mile.
That's right.
And there was a time where people thought it could never be done.
Right.
Now we're talking about someone running roughly 4 minutes and 35 seconds per mile
Right.
for 26.2 miles. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, so for all of you out there who are couch potatoes, who are dealing with obesity and diabetes, hopefully that inspires you.
Yeah.
You don't got to walk. You don't have to run 4-minute miles, but try to just walk and exercise a lot more than what
First
you're
step.
doing.
First
And just before we go to the main topics out there, also another shout out to gymnast Simone Biles,
Yes.
who
Right on.
Yes.
has the record for the most world championship medals. She got her 24th medal yesterday in the world championship out there, with a chance again for a 25th medal. It's just unbelievable what she's doing. And to Larry's point, there's some great athletic achievements that's happening with people of color that are just not getting the publicity they
And she's
should.
one of the great athletes in the history of sports, hands down. I know it's gymnastics, and so most people, you know, just sports fans don't follow gymnastics. But if you look at her accomplishments and what she's achieved, she's unquestionably one of the great athletes in history.
I just want to say this, and I'll talk to our technical people. One of the things that, and continuing that legacy of what bobsleigh created with the talk shows back on 98.7 KISS and carrying over here at WBLS, is that the main media at times don't give the proper coverage to those folks, but we will. We will bring those folks. And the reason why I said I'm going to talk to our technical people, I want to see if we can pipe through phone calls, because I just don't want to leave it just on air. I want to be able to pipe through some phone calls. Just like the other day, I got a chance to talk to the first mayor-elect of Montgomery, Alabama, Stephen Reed.
Yes, sir.
And I
Yes.
scooped Politics Nation, Reverend Sharpton, MSNBC, everybody. When he won that night, I had him on Reverend Sharpton's nationally syndicated radio show. And I give a shout out to attorney, well, his name is just slipping, Charles. What's Charles' last name? Charles that joins us sometime. His name,
The young fella.
yes, the young brother. I got to give him, because Stephen Reed is a Mega Sci-Fi, a Q.
Right.
And there you go. And he reached
My
out.
frat brother, big up, congratulations.
And so he put me direct in touch with the mayor-elect. So we got a chance to talk right away, and I made some things happen for this. So I just
See, I
wanted
was
to
gonna
shout out
bring that
there.
out there because I didn't want you. But since you said it, for
Yeah.
one more time.
There you go. Throw them hooks up, baby.
Congratulations,
Throw them
brother.
hooks up.
Congratulations.
Amazing achievement. The first black mayor of Montgomery. Montgomery was one of, during the course of the Civil War, there were several Confederate capitals.
And that was it.
And Montgomery was
Was the
one.
first.
Was the first.
The first.
And now this young brother is the first black mayor in the history of Montgomery where the Montgomery bus boycott took place.
Yeah, Morehouse
You know,
University grad, so
and
HBCU.
It's
That's
something.
right. So that attorney Charles Coleman Jr. So I thank you for that. But we have a lot to talk
So
about.
update, Nither will not be joining us this morning as she is caught up in some other things this morning.
Not a problem. Not a
Not do
problem.
man spread.
We're gonna, yeah. You can man. We're gonna this panel is we're gonna grow a little bit. We're gonna grow a little bit.
I
We're gonna,
stretch out on
Yeah,
the
you
couch now.
we're gonna grow a little bit because we're going to, as we move forward into, especially move forward in 2020. You know, we're going to possibly have somebody join the panel that is a conservative point of view, so we can have that.
You try
point
and
of
get
view.
some startup.
Oh yeah, I know. That's right.
There you go.
That's right. We gonna have it popping in here. But let's start off with this story, you know, and here we go again. Here we go again. We just finished with the trial dealing with former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger, dealing with the shooting of Botham Jean out there in Dallas, Texas. And now another Texas shooting that took place early Saturday morning of a black woman shot and killed by a white police officer out of Fort Worth, Texas. The young lady name is Tatiana Coquise Jefferson, 28 years old. She was killed in her bedroom at her home around 2:30 a.m. early Saturday morning. How this all came about is a neighbor, James Smith, called in as a non-emergency as a call concerning he saw a doors ajar and lights on. So he called, that's like a safety kind of call, just to make sure everything is okay there. The police have already released a video. And if you watch the video, as the police are searching the premises, they come into, it looks like an area, I don't know if it's, it has to be near home, right there. And the next thing you do is you hear one of the police officers say, "Show me your hands." And then pop, he shoots within 1 second. Within 1 second. And why does this continue to happen to us in our communities? Somebody again shot in their home. They said that they found a gun. Well, you know what? In Texas, it's an open and carry state. People can have guns. He shot through a window and shot and killed this woman.
And there was no indication that his life was being
exactly.
threatened.
They released the video, and I
Absolutely.
don't know if you saw the video. I got a chance to see the video, and it definitely didn't seem like his life was threatened
You
at
know,
all.
Bobby has talked about on this show ad nauseum and questioned the training that police receive. I think that is critical. But as you said, Fatine, and as you pointed out, Brother Pinkett, that training sometimes just becomes. I think it becomes something that officers by default aren't really using and utilizing and applying the training. They're going back to just their natural instinct, and as you said, their natural instinct in dealing with people of color.
Yeah, but they see a black face and it's shoot to kill.
And this police officer has only been in the force since April of 2018, April 6th to be exact, 2018. That is no excuse, but nonetheless, and I'll let Bobby expound on this, it does speak to the police training and these officers, once they get into real life situations, that training really is no longer applied. Yeah. And again, as I restate, they go back to what their default is, which is immediately to get into a defense mode.
Yep.
And draw their weapons.
Well, let's see if the justice system will take heed to what happened and indict this cop, just like it indicted the woman who shot the person in the house.
Yeah.
They didn't even identify as police officers.
Well, this, again, is to expand on what Jamie's talking about, right? So as you've seen over time, when officers get off, it's usually because they say, well, they followed their training and the administrative, protocols that they had.
Yeah,
so it's very rare. It's very rare
they
that
threaten the life.
Well, yeah, but that's part of it. They feel threatened, right? So that's usually, it's like, well, they felt that their life was at risk, and therefore when they have that feeling, then this is what they're supposed to do. So that's the direction of the training. Very rarely, unless it's a chokehold, and we saw how that happened with Eric Garner, are the police procedures and the training ever put on trial. So what happens is they say, like this officer now, he's going on administrative leave, and then they'll do the investigation. But I guarantee it's going to come out that part of the narrative is going to be he was just doing what he was trained to do, and it's unfortunate that a life, and boom, 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 and we will reconsider looking at our training moving forward. That doesn't help taking the life of a 28-year-old. And the neighbor who made the phone call is emotionally wrecked right now because he felt he was doing a good thing, knowing who she was, that she was taking care of an elderly aunt who's been in and out of the hospital.
Correct.
And there was an 8-year-old nephew living there. So she is the caregiver to multiple generations, and he was concerned that maybe something was going on. So he called who people would say you should do, right? Mm-hmm. Call the police. And he called not 911. He said, just as a safety precaution, not that, hey, I hear noises or that I hear a burglar, nothing to say that there was something of a threat. It was just more.
It was termed a non-emergency call.
Non-emergency call. And for a non-emergency call to result in the death of a 28-year-old woman in her own home through the window is unbelievable. So as they release more of the story, they say, well, there was a firearm by there. Well, I'm sure the way the police talked about it is, well, we did find a gun there, which is their part saying, well, that's why he was threatened. But once the forensics come out, they haven't said it was in her hand, whether she was next to it, whether the silhouette it showed up in the window that she was pointing. None of that.
It was just in the house.
Out there. She was in her own home. And it's just unfortunate that something like that would
Bobby,
happen.
the legal argument, Bob, that an officer feels threatened, which is the legal argument and the defense has been often used, it's subjective, which is why so many officers have been acquitted on that argument.
Very, very subjective.
Nonetheless, as Bobby pointed out and in detail stated, and as Fatine stated, there is the video. And so based on that, and this is, obviously early and preliminary, there is no indication, as Bobby pointed out, that the woman had the firearm in her hand, in her possession, was pointing it.
Yeah.
So obviously they'll use and more than likely use the argument or the defense that the officer's life was threatened, but under what basis? What were the circumstances? Why did you feel threatened if this woman did not have, once again, this firearm in her hand and it was a non-emergency call, which I'm sure was communicated and articulated to the responding officers?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the wrongful death lawsuit will realize all of these facts as true as you've articulated. And there will be a wrongful death lawsuit filed. And I predict the family will receive an enormous amount of money as a result.
But I got to jump in and pick it. I hear that, but that's like handing out cheese. I'm tired of it. Our folks are 6 feet under. I'm tired of this. Yeah, okay, compensation. All right, fine. Okay, that's the protocol. I'm tired of this now. This has to stop. And the message got to be stronger. The message has to be stronger than what the message is getting out there now.
Well, the people, this was Houston.
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
I'm sorry, Fort Worth, Texas. And there's a significant black community in Fort Worth. Yeah. The people need to pour out into the streets. They need to shut it down.
Shut it down.
This is outrageous. That literally in the aftermath, you would think that all the police across the country would kind of be on alert, like with what happened with Amber Geyer, a memo would have gone out to all the police saying, look, be sure.
Well, remember that old TV show, Hill Street Blues, and there was Sergeant Esterhouse, and he would always have his talk to the police officers, and he would say, be careful out there, but he would always tell them what to be on the lookout for.
Right. And now we have another situation with a black person in their home being shot down in cold blood, and I guarantee you that woman did not have a gun in her hand. Right. She had no reason to have a gun in her hand. They say they found a gun. How do we know it was her gun? How do we know it wasn't a throwdown? Yeah. These cops, this is a documented fact. It used to be kind of like folklore in our community, right? But now cops have actually been convicted and have actually confessed to having planted guns, drugs, and everything else on people to make an arrest. So what needs to happen, and based on what I've read on social media, some of the civil rights groups and activists in that area have already held press conferences, have already spoken out. But they got to come out in the street. Right. They got to put the pressure on. They got to shut things down, shut streets down, shut institutions down, businesses down, shut it down, and make it absolutely clear that there's gonna be a cost.
Yes.
If you kill us in cold blood, there is going to be a cost. Before we even get to the courtroom, there's gonna be a cost. Everybody, we're gonna spread some of this pain around, because you can't kill black people in the street in cold blood
and
just walk in their house and walk away from it. Now, they're gonna try and get this cop off to not do any time. They're gonna say, well, you know, he's like, you know, in the southern states, they have the stand your ground laws. They have all these laws that enable people to kill black people with impunity. They're going to use everything they can, just like they did with Amber Guy. They tried to use the house is your castle.
Right,
It wasn't even her house.
Right.
It wasn't even her castle, right? You know, but I'm telling you, if the black people in Fort Worth and other people of conscience, I'm sure Latinos down there, Chicanos down there in Texas are victims of police brutality. I would dare say there are probably some white people
Absolutely,
who are the
Larry.
victims of police
Absolutely.
brutality. Everybody that's opposed to police brutality need to come out and shut it down and keep shutting it down until you get just. Don't just shut it down for one day. Don't just protest for one day. Do it until you get justice.
Absolutely.
If Trump were a fair and reasonable president, he would have the Justice Department issue a warning to all the local municipalities about what they're doing. Remember now, it was the federal government that took on that other case and charged the lady with murder.
Trump is the police brutality president.
But
He
that's
is
what I'm
that.
saying.
Don't ask for anything for Trump.
No, but I'm saying-
Trump is the only president in history.
No,
who
I
said-
agree.
wait, no. Trump is the only president in history who, at a police rally in Long Island, told the police that when you arrest people, don't be gentle with
Right.
them. Slam their head into the car door when you putting them in the car. You can't hope for nothing from Trump. The International Police Association just endorsed the re-election of Donald Trump. Trump, the cops, the Justice Department, Barr,
Giuliani,
Sessions,
the whole
Giuliani, they are all the same. They are reprobate, unrepentant, unreconstructed
That's right.
racists that need to be driven out of office.
That's right.
Don't ask a damn thing
Thing
from
about-
Trump.
Let me
Remember,
give an
one of,
example,
one of
yeah.
Sessions' first acts as Attorney General was trying to make it so to be harder to prosecute police officers for murdering people.
Right.
Well,
And
but
all-
that's my
That,
point.
was, that was one of his
don't-
first acts.
And I'm not letting Trump skate, but go back to President Obama. We had Eric Garner. I mean, we had Eric Gardner. Did we get any indictments? No.
Zero.
So that example picket goes out the window.
No, my point is, if we had a fair presidency,
We had a fair president with President Obama.
and a reasonable presidency, they would take the necessary action.
When
to
have we
make
ever
sure-
had a reasonable president?
Give me an example.
When have
Pickett.
we have
Give me
ever-
an example of
And
a
I
reasonable
hope,
president.
I'll
don't
give you-
nobody go down to
Let Pickett
Fort
give-
Worth
let Pickett give us an
and
example
start
of a
singing
reasonable
Amazing
president
Grace,
that we-
because that's what Obama did.
Wait.
Perhaps if Obama had taken a harder
Harder
line
stance. I agree
on
with that.
police brutality,
There's no forgiveness
we
there.
wouldn't be in here
That's
now.
right.
Instead of going down there to sing Amazing Grace, Barack Obama should have gone down there and led a national march
There's no forgiveness.
against
Absolutely.
racism and police brutality.
And
But
you
let-
make, and you
let-
make,
let
and you make a
Pickett
great, and you,
respond.
but you make a great point, Larry. You said there are Chicanos, black, whites, Asians. Every ethnicity, race has been a victim of this, and so we have to coalesce as a people. Certainly, black people are the most have been most egregiously violated, but as humans, as human beings, as a human race, we have all been victims of this, and so we must coalesce because, as you pointed out, Larry, it's not about singing Amazing Grace, and it's not about forgiveness. It's about getting out there, and it's about taking action because this has to end. Innocent people are getting murdered. This is destroying lives and families.
Let me let Pickett have the
Yeah,
respond.
give
me
I
an
go
example
back-
of a reasonable president
I go
that
back-
has done this and that we received these indictments.
I go back to the Johnson administration and Hubert Humphrey.
Wow.
I used to.
What year?
I was a.
What year?
This is in the late '60s.
So you use that as an example of all these years coming up to 2019.
You asked for an example.
go ahead. You're right. All right.
Johnson responded and reacted appropriately. My boss, Hubert Humphrey, I used to work for Hubert Humphrey. I was one of his attorneys. He would react responsibly. Jimmy Carter would react responsibly on these kinds of issues, send attorney generals out to investigate, and if they find a defect in the way the police responded, they would indict these people, just like what happened, a year ago with the shooting of the woman. But no, the federal government has to take and participate in these kinds of issues. If they don't participate and say that we're overlooking what you're doing, then these police officers will feel that they have absolute flexibility.
But under this Justice Department, that will never happen.
I agree.
Never happen.
I agree. But I'm just using examples of how the federal government can intervene and come in and investigate. Right now, the cops feel comfortable with not having any oversight of what they do. And maybe the indictment and the conviction of the police officer within the last couple of weeks, maybe that indictment will wake up police officers that they cannot just kill people.
But we just got a guilty sentence. Of course, the 10 years was a slap in the face. But that just happened, and the woman is dead, Pickett.
I know.
So it's not an example. It's not working.
And up for parole in 5.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
but
5
my
years.
point, though, team, my point is that the federal government intervened. They didn't win the case, but they intervened, and that's what we need the federal government to do.
Well, it's not going to happen under Trump,
No,
because
no, that's my point.
Trump was endorsed by the 333,000 member of the Fraternal Order of Police. This is a president that was endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan and by the police. In return for the police endorsement, Trump appointed an unreconstructed racist, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, as the head of the Justice Department, who upon taking office said that they are not going to impose any more consent decrees on any more cities, and they are going to put under review the current consent decrees, which was a signal to the police that, hey, y'all, we got your back. Y'all can continue doing what you're doing. So it's not going to happen under Trump. And I dare say, I ain't seen all that much justice under Democrats or Republicans. Now, I'm a Democrat. I voted for Barack Obama. I voted for him twice, but I ain't going to sit here and lie and make believe like we had some kind of utopia.
Well, that was Fatigue's point to Pickett. It hasn't
under
happened
the Democrats.
but the Democrats, Republicans, under any administration, certainly within our lifetime and before that.
Playing games.
The only places that the federal government came in are those places where there was a tremendous outcry from the community. The federal government didn't come in nowhere where everybody sat quiet and said, let's let the system work. They went into Ferguson because there was an uprising in Ferguson. They went into Staten Island because there were huge marches for Eric Garner again and again and again. They go where the people, and that is the lesson. If you sit and remain silent while people are being murdered in cold blood, you're not going to get nothing.
And historically, they haven't stepped in, whether it's voting rights, whether it's the insegregation. They've never stepped in unless under intense pressure. We know that.
So I just want to say, as I read the streams out there, so we appreciate your passion and your fire, and clearly we're in America. You can express your free views and thoughts, but please don't attack people by race. So I'm just looking at what's going on and the anti-Latino comments that are in here, unnecessary, uncalled for, and I just ask you to stop doing that. So
yeah, I mean, some of these comments, agree or disagree, but. Just to read a couple here. Jeff Palin, I agree with you. Donnell, an eye for an eye. Pat Johnson, we are on our own with all these black folks that we put in office. Total silence. Chestnut Street Consulting. We have infiltrated the DLJ. No, I'm sorry. WS. I'm not sure what that WS stands for. I have infiltrated the DOJ and the United States legal system. Pat Thompson said to me, Pickett only speaks once in a while. Let Pickett get his point across. And I had to hit Pat back and say, I am the one that's allowing him, going back to Pickett to make sure he gets his thoughts through. Edward Latson says, amen, Larry, preach. So we encourage your thoughts, agree or disagree, And someone said that, I want to get back to it. Darnell says this show finally it got some balls. So we thank you for your comments. We're going to move on. Like I said, a lot of news this week. So this coming Tuesday. This Tuesday will be the biggest presidential primary debate in history. There will be 12 candidates on the stage at one time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Just the sight of it, Larry. He said,
I tell you that, and we say everyone has a right to run, but now something is gonna have to start to happen here in the sense of.
And Steyer, who was, let's be honest, the first major voice of these candidates to call for impeachment, he's finally taking the stage, and so that should be pretty interesting.
Exactly.
One of our boys, Cory Booker, who
That's your boy.
That's your boy. Well, I only say our boy only because this radio station helped his election.
I wasn't
to
here.
there.
Don't hold mine. I wasn't here.
Piggy, how I went at you and Bob, so don't start. All right?
Bob Slade and
I'm cool with Cory. I'm cool with
Bob
Senator
Slade,
Cory Booker. He has shown
Right.
for me, he has shown he has started to stand up as a senator.
Right.
And I can see a person growth. I can change my point of view. And I've said it a couple of weeks ago. I stand with Cory on a lot of issues that he has taken up, and I stand with him. And I wish that I would see that more in the polls.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing that in the polls. But we will see. But
But the reality,
this-
but the reality is, Fatima, and you were here, and I was here, and Slade, we helped launch his political career, and we helped him get elected.
And what did he give you for it?
And he says that.
What you get? You keep saying this every week like an advertisement.
yeah.
What did you get?
We want him on that couch.
Did you get
We want
something?
him on that couch next to Larry. When he gets on that couch next to Larry, then we can say that. But let me say this. This is going to be a very interesting and I think extremely significant debate, particularly since, the Ukraine issue, has emerged since this last debate. And now certainly Biden is going to be on the spot. And rest assured, he's going to be asked about the appropriateness of Hunter Biden, his son, sitting on the boards of those companies in Ukraine. And secondly, I do think that for Biden, and something Larry said weeks ago was very interesting, I've been taking note of that, will he be able to sustain and last throughout this campaign? And Trump, I will say this, he's a con man. So con men seize on the weaknesses. And one of the things that he seized on early with the name Low Energy Joe, one of the nicknames, and certainly that's something that I've observed, is that when you see Elizabeth Warren, and you mentioned Cory Booker and other candidates, but particularly Warren, who is 70 years old, and she has the energy of someone who's 40.
Yes.
And
shows
she's
that.
out there and she shows it. Well, I think Biden seems to be, his energy level seems to be waning, interesting enough.
Laid back.
Larry made that point. And I think given how Trump was attacking Hunter Biden and attacking Joe Biden for a period of a week and a half, and Biden was essentially silent, and he let the Republicans and Trump shape that narrative. To me, that was telling. And I said, well, what is his campaign doing? Who is advising him? Because he needed to immediately go on the attack. And then when he finally responded, some people said it was a strong response. I didn't see it that way. I felt that, he did defend himself, but nonetheless, it wasn't the type of passion and energy and I think, resonance that someone who, him and Warren now are considered the front runners in some polls she is, a front runner would react and respond and position themselves, giving that this was an opportunity for Biden, I think. And I think his campaign didn't seize on this.
So just a side note on, since you're talking about Biden and his son Hunter, So Hunter has actually stepped down from the board position he had of the Chinese equity company, and he's made a public statement and says, as long as my father is running, or if when he wins the presidential nominee, I will not be doing those sort of things, which some of the Democrats early on criticized the Bidens for saying, well, you should have known better for having that appearance of a conflict of interest. I got a different view on that, but that being said, so he's now removing that from it, right?
Yes.
But the irony that gets me is the Trump kids are still
Absolutely, Bobby.
making money and just bastardizing everything that their father is associated with, and it just they're throwing these slings and arrows, with Giuliani doing the same thing. And I've said before, Giuliani's son works in the White House.
Yes.
If that's not a conflict of interest,
Yes.
what is, right? So for them to go on this attack, and, Nither's not here, but she always says it, that the Democrats are just too nice. When someone comes after them, with guns, then, they throw flowers back at them, and they don't stand their ground. So Biden's response is stereotypical to what Democrats have always done when they've been attacked by the Republicans. And they have this Trump is a different animal, it's a different beast, and that is his whole strategy, which is he will attack. And
Sister Nita, and I'm sorry, Larry, I was going to reference her too, Bobby, using that same analogy. She's absolutely right when she repeatedly says the Democrats are terrible at messaging. And that's where the Republicans, without question, have been able to, I think, really just take again and take the lead in shaping how these campaigns and how the country views these issues. Because he should have immediately, in my opinion, he should have brought that up regarding Trump's kids and Giuliani's kids. But instead, he remained silent. And then when he did finally make a statement, he didn't mention that. That's something that, again, as you said, you got to, go lower. Sometimes that's necessary. And he needed to go directly at Trump and his family, the kleptocrats, my brother Achille, using that term, the kleptocratic nature of Trump, his kids, and the administration. But Biden did not do that, nor did any other Democrat do that.
Let me just say one thing about Biden right now. Two things. The first thing about Biden, I think that he will not do good if he goes head to head with Trump. Because he seems to be more of a reactionary person right now. He is not, he's always responding late. He's not initiating. And I think if you want to be, you are the front runner now by some polls, and now Warren has come up. You have to be willing to go out there and attack when need be. You can't just wait for something to happen, then you wait a week or 2 or 3 weeks, and then to come finally out and, I call for impeachment now. It's always with Biden, at least in this so far primary season, that he is more responsive than being attacking and being on the as I get stuck here, initiating conversation, initiating thoughts, and Trump, to me, will eat someone up like that.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, well,
I think the problem is that Biden, and this is a problem with the Democrats, are somewhat compromised. I don't think Biden was hesitant about the initial response to Trump. I think his handlers, his campaign manager and others told him, the less you say, the better, because there's a problem. There's a problem when your son is sitting on the board of an energy company in the Ukraine being paid $50,000 a month to be a board member, not an executive officer.
Yeah.
$50,000 a month. That's just one board. That there are other boards. I think the strategy is the less you say about this, the better. And this has always been a difficult problem for the Democrats when you're both taking money from the same people,
Right.
it makes it difficult
Yeah.
for you to attack the other, when in fact you're doing similar things. And I think that's part of the problem here.
And we've seen that, right, with campaign donations, right? When you got someone who is donating to both parties, and then a scandal comes out with that person, and some of the politicians will say, well, I'm going to give that money back, or I'm going to use it for something else. So they all collect money from folks. Just on the Biden, just to get the timelines right, when this story broke, he was no longer on the board. Granted, he was on the board. He was getting these crazy salaries. He was on the board in an advisory role about corporate governance. And so the way boards are set up, one of the things the boards are responsible for is making sure that that company has the appropriate governance. So the law firm that he was associated with is how he got on the board there, to bring expertise, not about energy, but right on the heels of their corruption investigation, to ensure that they had the right governance in place moving forward. And so he did a 5-year term on that board, and then he stepped down from that board. So even the attacks that are coming out are a bit dated, right? So yes, it's a fact he was on the board during a certain period of time, but the attacks, as you listen to Trump and Giuliani, make it seem like he's still on that board, which he's not, and he just now stepped down from the Chinese board.
But listen to what you said, Bobby. Listen how you framed that and crafted that. That's all they had to do.
Right. I agree.
If
That's simple.
that's simple.
That's simple.
But to speak to what you said, Fatine, you have to go on the attack.
You have to.
You have to, and that's one thing that Warren, that Bernie, Kamala, so many of these other candidates, they do. They go on the attack, and now you have to credit them for that.
Right.
Biden, he's trying to take the high road, I guess. And as you said, his handlers and those advising him and telling him, listen, the country wants the alternative at this point to someone who stands up at a rally and says Biden kisses Obama's ass.
Man, you ever
using
heard
the
any
term-
president talk
Have you
like
heard
that?
any president speak that way? So they feel like we have to present ourselves as someone who is the opposite of this foul-mouthed, very vile man who holds this office. I don't like to use the term president. That is the title he has been given, but I don't like to refer to him as the president. But again, Fatine, you're right. You have to go on the attack. And even if they didn't go on the attack, if they would have framed it, maybe they should hire Bobby. If they would have framed it,
$50,000 a month.
if they would have framed it just like that,
Right.
then that would have mitigated a lot of what Trump was out there, and the Republicans and those who on primetime Fox, because we saw Shepard Smith is gone, because the true news people at Fox are like, enough is enough with this.
Right.
Then certainly the people would have looked at this, I think, differently, and looked at Biden differently, and would have understood better Hunter's position with that company sitting on the board.
Yeah. With I know there's a lot of momentum for Elizabeth Warren, and we talked about this last week. If you missed the show last week, we had Toombs who had joined us. But one of the main points there we got into between Larry and Toombs was how Bernie's message has been co-opted by many, including Elizabeth Warren. So his agenda and so forth. One of the problems that Elizabeth Warren is going to face, and this has to do with Democrats who are rich. So yes, they are rich Democrats. And they feel threatened by the extreme talk, as they hear it, from what she wants to do with corporations. And so now you're going to run into a potential situation where, they may sit on the sideline, or, which is probably the case, because I can't see most educated, rich Democrats putting their vote on 45 again.
I can.
But I do think that they're just going to sit out in certain key places, or not fund it when we get to the final candidate out there. So she's going to have to figure out how to straddle the line, or just say, you know what, I'm going to get enough support to offset this segment of well-off Democrats, because they are scared of what she is talking about, because it sounds so extreme.
It does, but I disagree that they won't, again, vote for Trump if it comes to her Warren, but simply because those same people knew who he was before. The
Well,
first time, and many of them, and yes,
But they voted for Hillary. So, but
no.
many of them voted because they
Many of
were
them did, but you
they were
had-
less worried about Hillary. You know, and if Achille was here, he would say because everyone felt that Hillary was in their pocket. They don't feel as though Elizabeth Warren's been in their pocket, and they clearly see the damage that Trump has done to their pocket. That's why I don't think they would vote for him.
But I think sometimes the numbers, and when people really look at the numbers and they don't, I think the misconception is it was people without college degrees, people who were essentially didn't have a high level of education. That was his primary base. And while he did gain a significant number of those voters, he gained a significant number of educated voters too. And so, and again, as an educated voter, even in 2016, you had to see who this man was, particularly those from this area. You know, Wall Street, you knew who he was.
Yeah.
And so I do agree, though, that they are fearful of Warren.
Yeah.
In terms of her policies, no question. They think she is too far to the left. And that's why I do believe that balancing the ticket ultimately for whoever is a Democratic nominee is going to be extremely important.
So I thought this thought I had this week, and it's just pure speculation. But as the heat continues to rise on 45, will there be and I call it a Hail Mary using a sports term, the Republicans all of a sudden shifting and putting forth a different nominee, whether it's a Romney
Won't happen.
at the last second, and
I brought that up 2 weeks ago.
right now back 2 weeks ago, I was saying, you know what, I don't see it happening, but as more and more of this Ukraine story unfolds, there are certain things that are coming to light about first of all, how long Trump has been associated with the Ukraine, the connections through Manafort. Now you're getting in deep with his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, how deep Giuliani is in that. We already know the Russia connection to it. So I believe more and more people, as we said, now there's more than one whistleblower. You have career State Department employees who are now coming out saying something's not right. It just feels to me as though more of light is going to be shed on just how corrupt he has been in his practices. You know, Rex Tillerson has gone out and he's actually talking a little bit more about how he just couldn't get on the same page with this because
And he stopped Trump from committing many illegalities.
committing crimes, right?
Committing
crimes.
Absolutely.
So I just throw that out there, which is if that was to happen, then no matter which one of these 12 remain standing, that will give some hope to those that say these 12 are too far to the left. We don't have to deal with 45. The safer bet is going to be who the Republicans put in the last minute.
Right. There already are, I believe, 2 Republicans, one in office and one
Right.
former office holder.
William
that-
Bill,
right,
yeah.
that-
And Sanford's the other one that's
Sanford
trying to
and
do
Will.
it,
that
who
are
had his
running-
own corruption.
Right.
Exactly. So
That-
Sanford and Well right now.
Right. So there are already 2 other Republicans in the race, but they're not backed by the Republican Party establishment. The Republican Party establishment is still with Trump. Now, Romney is interesting because when I listen to Robert's somber and judicious tone, it calms me down and it allows the cerebrum to overcome the medulla oblongata. It makes me think, you know, first of all.
In other words, the rational over the emotional.
That's right.
To
That's
put
right.
it in layman's terms.
That's right. But one thing we know in politics, you know,
Politics.
anything can happen.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. When conditions change, other things that you couldn't imagine happen. So, looking at Romney's behavior this week, you know, it could be that perhaps Romney is positioning himself, should the impeachment have a greater impact than people think it will, because you remember everybody was saying, oh, this impeachment, people don't support it. in 1 week, it went from a minority of Americans to a majority.
Yeah.
And they haven't even taken a vote yet.
Right, over 50%.
Imagine what will happen if he's actually impeached. So it could be that Mitt Romney might be trying to position himself as the Republican candidate should Trump drop out. But, you know, in some ways, what did Benjamin Franklin say together? He said, we all stick together or we'll all hang together. And they all are connected to Trump. Their fortunes are connected to Trump. Their offices are connected to Trump. And Trump knows this. And so they got this kamikaze mentality now that no matter what evidence, I mean, look at everything
this.
this.
I think it's cracking, Larry, because
Well,
if
look
you
at
look
Syria.
at the situation,
Look at Syria,
that's where I
right.
want to go into that about this week, where the Trump administration said Friday that they are sending more troops, fighter jets, and missile defense weaponry into Saudi Arabia, and that announcement comes on the heels of President Trump's abrupt decision to pull U.S. troops out of the northeastern region of Syria, where now, as you, I assume you was going to, Bobby, as we look at the Turkey situation, now they're moving in. You saw Lindsey Graham came out against the president right now and said, no, you should not have pulled those troops out of Syria. So I believe that is starting to crack.
Yeah, and you know, and they tried to spin that in terms of, well, he's not pulling out, he's just moving. But what the message has been received, Turkey has gone in there. Turkey has started bombing. There are already reports about atrocities that the Turkish soldiers are doing. There's a report out there that one of the activists, on the Kurdish activists, a female, has been captured, raped, and stoned to death by Turkish troops out there. So there's all these stories that are coming out. Some being confirmed by, U.S. military, and then on social media, again, you don't know what's fact or fiction. But for that to happen in less than a week after his decision, which is another thing, right? So if you this had to been going on for a while, you don't announce on one day that we're pulling back, and then 48 hours later, bombings occur. You know, that means that they were planned months in advance. And so now you see on the national stage, you've already lost some standing in the international arena, because many of the other political leaders around the world don't think very highly of the president. They're trying to figure out how they can milk this as much as they can, but then they see these atrocities between Turkey, and we already talked about, in past shows, how the turnaround of Erdogan, where he was anti-Putin in Russia, and now he seems to be a puppet of Russia. Russia's already in Syria. So you just see all this on the national stage playing out, which if the Republicans are saying, wait a minute, this is not right, to me, I see that more the cracking out there. So that's what I'm saying.
I disagree, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the Syria issue is a safe issue for Lindsey Graham and the rest of these Republicans. Right. You see that they were, they didn't hesitate. There was no trepidation, there was no hesitation to speak out on the Syria issue. Why? Because that's not an issue that is going to sway or move their constituencies. If they go against Trump on impeachment, if they go against him on the Ukraine phone call, if they go against him on the collusion and the obstruction, those are issues that will move and sway Trump, the cult of Trump, which is still relatively strong. Plurality, but relatively strong. Right. I mean, they are just unmovable, okay? They will go and they will say, okay, we're going to vote you out of office, Lindsey, and every other Republican who was going against. So Graham, they know that. See, they will challenge him on Syria because the constituents, they don't really care about that. But it's the other issues, and Trump knows that. And so that's why he'll take the hit on Syria. But they don't dare speak out on the Ukrainian issue, on the taxes, and all these other illegalities and criminality that he is committing. And so I don't see that as a crack. I see that as strategic. So Graham could say, hey, we do speak out against the president. No, you don't. Not on the issues that you know might jeopardize you with your constituency.
Yeah, let me just say this here. Just reading an article stating that there's some in the West Wing that Trump cannot ignore some of
It's
the.
Clarence Thomas. It's calling Bob. No, yeah, because he knows some of these issues are going to the Supreme Court.
I tell
So
Bob to cut his phone off,
that's
I
Clarence
tell
right
you.
there.
But in the coming weeks, White House acting chief staff Mike Mulvaney is planning to help Trump begin a quiet offense with congressional Republicans hosting private dinners and meetings, gathering at Camp David, and other ways of expressing appreciation for their support. It goes on to say, from CNN reports that the president
Lift your mic up high.
the president has been lighting up the phone lines of his allies on Capitol Hill, including multiple calls per day to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Cracks are happening now. It's happening. It's happening. And I think that the Republicans don't want to get caught with their pants down. And right now the momentum is in Trump's favor, but that momentum, I believe, is starting to slow down right now.
Well, momentum.
That call was from Trump.
Yeah,
Momentum in
he
terms
wants to have
of,
dinner
momentum
with
in
you.
terms of, you know, and what Bobby said, it's plausible, and I do agree that Romney's positioning himself. But see, Romney knows in Utah he's as safe as any Republican in the Senate.
Right.
As long as Romney wants that Senate seat, he's going to have it.
Right.
So Romney knows he's safe, and I do think he is positioning himself for what may happen. But I don't see the Republicans, because look at all the Republicans who are up. How many of those Republicans have spoken out? How many have even commented? And then when they are questioned, it's obfuscation.
Right.
They give no direct answer.
Right.
A simple question.
Right.
A simple question that all of them have been asked. Was it appropriate for? They don't even want to answer yes.
Is it appropriate for a president to seek help from a
Absolutely. They will
foreign
not
country
even
against a political
Bobby, they won't
opponent?
even answer directly on
That's
that
a
question.
yes or no
Yes or no.
question, and they dance around it. You know, Pat Thompson, our viewer, so shout out Pat. She asked the question, what about Pence, right? So we talk about Romney, Pence. So Pence is touched by this Ukrainian issue as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, it is a possibility. But again, I so many unconventional things have happened
Right.
so far. Again, and just so many things that just boggle your mind. I've talked about this before, about the large number of people who turn over in this administration. He has not even finished his 4 years.
It's a record number, not large.
So
it's
now
a record number.
you have the third Department of Homeland Security person who is stepping down.
Right.
So we have had 3 in 3 years. We will have a 4th. And there is a quote out there that when they asked Trump about this, he says, I'm okay with people in acting positions because it's easier for me to fire and remove them.
Yeah, because he's operating like he operates his
Department
business.
of Homeland Security. And you will say that security and making America safe is at the top of your mind, but yet you run it like you got a temp agency.
Yeah.
And you know, and again, you see, which is baffling, and this is, you know, I think the enticement and the intoxication of power. You see men like Pompeo and Rick Perry and Bill Barr, people who, whether you agree with their politics or not, on some level they were respected by many in government. You look at, they have essentially compromised their integrity, their careers, their reputations for this man. He has sway over people that already had power, already had money, who already had standing. And so when you look at the words he constantly uses, this is a coup, and he repeatedly says that. You know, this is an illegal impeachment inquiry. He is setting the stage for, and we talk about taking the street, his constituents, his people to take to the streets, and they will.
Right.
Trust me, they will take to the streets. And this is what so many of those Republicans fear. And while there may be, certainly, Bobby, and it is plausible down the road, someone who may step up of the stature of a Romney and challenge him, At this point, I don't see it.
Right.
Yeah,
I just don't see.
let me just throw this out here, and you know, I throw a curveball to Bobby. Bobby hits it out the park. You know, I'm gonna throw three things out there, and
Or I bunted.
Yeah.
Hey, you still get the first base.
Try to make contact.
This
Just
week,
looking on base.
you had Maria L. Yovanovitch, who was recalled as the American ambassador to Ukraine, testify at the impeachment hearings this past Friday that a top State Department official told her that President Trump had pushed for her removal for months, even though the department believed she had done nothing wrong. In a closed-door deposition that could further fuel calls for Mr. Trump's impeachment, Ms. Yovanovitch delivered a scathing indictment of his administration conduct of foreign policy, warning that private influence and personal gain had usurped diplomats' judgment, threatening to undermine the nation's interest and drive talented professionals out of public service. We also have this week where now U.S. Ambassador Gordon Sondland now plans to testify in Trump's impeachment inquiry. And then you had two of Giuliani associates tied to the Ukraine scandal arrested on campaign finance charges. And that comes on the heels of a Fox News poll where there is record support for Trump impeachment. And that in July 2019, 42% wanted impeached and remove of Trump. Now is at 51%. President Trump's job performance in September 2019 was at 45%. Now his approval rating is at 43%. And what President Trump said on the call with President of Ukraine, some feel at 43% that is an impeachable offense. Bobby, I kind of gave a little synopsis of the week, but connect all the dots in there.
So, you know, first I'll start off with viewer Anthony Long, who, this is, I think, a great line. He says Giuliani is the underboss of the Trump crime family. I think that's very appropriate.
Underboss.
The underboss there. But, yeah, so you have these so picture this, everyone. You've been working at your job for double-digit years. You understand the culture, the operating norms, the philosophy. There's a level of professionalism that's been established. And then you get a new boss that comes in who disregards that history and puts in place something that is so unconventional. Now, at first you would say, well, I need to be open-minded and try it. But then when you press to say, could you give me, back to your point, my rational side of my brain needs to understand what you're trying to achieve by putting in these changes. And you get either no answer or something that just doesn't smell right. This is what she has gone through to say, wait, I've been doing this for a long time. There's certain protocols, there's certain approaches. It's grounded in some kind of strategy and philosophy. So the more and more she probed, she would come out and find this is a self-serving act. This is not if that's not the national agenda. That's his personal agenda, where he's trying to undermine the fact that a file was created during the election that said that he was into some unhealthy acts. And, you know, so he felt that he's always felt as though his win has an asterisk next to it because of the file, the Michael Steele file that has come out. And he's trying to tie it back to the Ukraine. And so you got Manafort with the Ukraine, you got Giuliani with the Ukraine. He's been pushing this agenda to say, can we get the Ukraine, can we say that they generated this through their corruptness? I wouldn't be surprised if Putin, because remember, the U.S. intelligence agencies talk about how Russia was at the root of meddling in the election, not this file. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's doing this on behalf to give Russia some cover, but also to try to remove that asterisk there. So Sutherland, who is now going to go speak next week, again, he was a $1 million donator to the Trump campaign.
Hotel magnate.
Right? Talk about quid pro quo. Somehow he ends up with this ambassador role, so he's there, but his purview was the UK. Last time you get a map out, Ukraine is not in the UK.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, the Ukraine is not even part of the EU, so you can even
He was
say
the ambassador to the EU.
he was ambassador to the EU.
Yeah.
So
Sutherland.
right?
Yeah.
And so now he's on these text messages we talked about before with what's guy his name's escaping me now, who resigned to actually
Volker.
Right? Thank you, Volker. And in there he says we need to take this conversation offline. But let me be clear: the president has said this is not going to be a quid pro quo. The reports now are that he's going to testify because he's not sure the president was truthful to him when he said this was not a quid
Yeah,
pro
I
quo.
saw that last night.
So we'll find out about that. But this whole Ukrainian thing between Giuliani, to me, it's just the corruptness of it, right? He's trying to remove this asterisk. He's trying to give Russia some cover. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get Manafort out of jail to give him a legitimate pardon, because what Manafort did is associated with Ukraine, right? So you remember what he's going to jail for are these things that happen
In Ukraine.
right, in the Ukraine, right, and all the things that he did in money laundering back here. These two guys that got arrested, Giuliani associates, all of a sudden Trump says, well, I don't know. I take pictures of a lot of people. I don't know them. But there's pictures of of them together.
Back for years.
Right, and his son, Don Jr., is sitting there at a table. So when you talk about a mob underboss, there are all these photos of them sitting around just
Trump,
doing these things.
They were in the White House. They took pictures
Right.
of Trump bedside, and he said, "I don't know how Rudy knows these guys. I don't know these guys." But yet, the pictures surface of him in the White House. And let me say, we know Giuliani has always been duplicitous, and the narrative of him being a hero mayor, we know that's garbage. Those of us who have been in the city for our entire lives. But let me say this, and Bobby, that was very eloquently stated. But
That's why I handed off.
But let's not leave out, I think what's even far more troubling than Giuliani, you have the Attorney General, who, you could argue, even has more, is more powerful than the president, in some circumstances. He's traveling around the world, investigating, obviously, on the direction of the president. Still, the Russian collusion and the Still dossier.
Right.
I mean, think about all the things that are taking place in this country. We talk about a woman getting shot and killed in Fort Worth. These are the things that the Attorney General and the Justice Department should be focused on. He's focusing on
A political opponent.
A political opponent. Still, I mean, so that is even more troubling than what Giuliani's doing, because he's just a paid buffoon at this point.
Trump is pursuing this Ukraine, brought it up initially because he got away with it with Russia.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He got away with it with Russia. He's not doing anything much differently than he did with Russia.
Right.
He said, Russia, investigate Hillary Clinton. He got away with it, so he said, Ukraine,
Release the
investigate
emails, yeah.
Joe
And Larry,
Biden.
the phone call took
Got-
place the day after the Mueller testified, the day after.
Got away with it after people said, that's treasonous. Got away with it, and then the next day said China, investigate, and he'll keep going.
Right.
Publicly.
Because he thinks he is invincible.
That's it,
But
Teflon Don.
we are guilty because we feed in to the mythology of Trump's invincibility.
Trumpism.
We are going around here talking about he might get reelected again. He can't be defeated. He's so strong. With the whole list of things that Fatim just read off, and the list of things that Bobby has just given us, Trump is like his own worst enemy.
And that was a small list.
Right. Sometimes the enemy's biggest adversary are his own weaknesses. And the Trump administration is so corrupt that its own internal corruption is going to be one of the things that either bring it down through impeachment, bring it down through some other legal action or bring him down at the ballot box, because it's obvious that the American people are getting to a point where they're saying enough. Enough.
Listen to this week. This is crazy coming from the president of the United States. This week, this past Thursday, Donald Trump had a rally where he attacked his rival Joe Biden, and he basically said that Biden was only a good vice president because he understood how to kiss Barack Obama's ass. That's what he said at this rally. Now, Joe Biden responds with a tweet. Again,
Before you go that way, just question. What do you think Mike Pence is doing, right? So if that's his definition of a good vice president, you think that's his definition as what Mike Pence is doing to him?
And Lindsey Graham and Bill Barr, and it goes on and on and on.
Good point. But this is what this is what Joe Biden had to say. He stated, "I spent my night at the HRC forum talking about the fundamental respect every human being deserves." Biden, that's what Biden tweeted. "You spent yours showing how little respect for anyone else you have. America is so much stronger than your weakness." Now that's nice, but if you're running for president and you're one of the top leaders, you got to come out stronger, and you need to be. And you got to keep this attack going
you
on
can kiss
and
my
on.
ass.
Going
That's what he should
on
have
and
said.
on and on. And I'm not saying, you know what, like Michelle Obama said, they go low, we go high. I mean, sometimes you got to get out there and fight, baby. You got to get out there
I
and
would
fight.
recommend to the Biden campaign that they go and hire Dave Chappelle or our
There
boy
you go.
Talent, who is here,
There you go.
who can come back with these quick whips and just put people in
I
their
agree.
place. Don Jr. had sent a tweet out with an image of Kamala Harris as she was on CNN this week, and there's a clip of her laughing, and he basically says, she's one of those people who laughs at her own jokes, and she
Yes.
laughs too long, and blah, blah, blah. So she writes back to him saying, "You wouldn't know a joke, even the ones that raised you." And I just thought it was so good that way she came back, and her.
That's it.
So
We need that fire. We need that kind of fire.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a fire in the person that is going to be running for that's going to represent the Democratic Party. I want to see some fire. And I also want to go back to something when we was talking about Bernie. Of course, a lot of people are going to be looking at Bernie Sanders at this debate because of the heart attack situation. But I'm going to say is, of course, we're going to look at that. But one of the things I want to hear from Bernie, and I think the only way he's going to make some ground wave, if Bernie says something different than what he's been saying. I wrote the bill. And he's going to have to, if he doesn't change or add something to his conversation, I know you're looking, Larry, and I expect
I
a
was looking at the
response.
time.
Oh, I expect a response. But if Bernie comes out and say the same old thing, I just think he's going to continue to tank. And that's all I can tell you.
yeah.
Bernie's not tanking.
Okay.
Bernie is not tanking. In fact, not only is he not tanking, he's the leader in campaign contributions.
Right now,
He's
Right
well,
now.
we've been in this thing for about
Which is
6
a
months.
struggle.
It,
We got
that-
it
we
ain't
got that
like
heart
we
attack.
started
That's
That's a
yesterday.
strong indicator.
We got
You
a
know,
heart attack right
he-
now.
That's a
he-
strong
yes,
indicator.
Yes, he did have a heart attack, and I was
recovering.
and I was. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was despondent about his heart attack, but what I think is interesting is that he could actually gain more support as a result of that. I remember when I had a terrible car accident years ago in 14. And, the first day I was in the hospital, had 17 broken ribs, broken arms, I was really jacked up. I felt totally isolated. But in time, the outpouring from the community was such that I actually came out of hospital stronger than when I went in. I think Bernie can actually come out of this heart attack situation stronger than when he went in. Yes, people are going to raise questions, and people should raise questions.
That's right.
I'm not saying people should. That's going to happen, but I don't think that is going to necessarily end his conversation, end his campaign. His support has been relatively the same. It goes up a few points, come down a few points, but in a way, he's kind of on the voter side reflecting a mirror image of what Trump is on the right side. Trump has like 35% rock support, that he will have that even if he's impeached. And I think Bernie has his support, and that his support will remain constant. And, all of this is subject to change once the primaries begin. And as for Elizabeth Warren has had a free ride for the most part. People have stayed away. Number one, Bernie and Warren are basically in the same camp. Elizabeth Warren is Bernie light. If the ruling class fears Elizabeth Warren, then they are terrified of Bernie Sanders, because none of Elizabeth Warren's proposals are stronger than the policy platforms that have been offered by Bernie Sanders. Furthermore, Biden and other candidates have stayed away from leveling heavy attacks at Elizabeth Warren because they're afraid of alienating the white woman vote. Now, she's been in a safe position and probably will remain so, but I believe that will change once the primaries begin, because the primaries are going to be the great sifter. All of them people that are standing up there, out the window they go after the first month of primaries. Whether they go formally or whether they go de facto, people are going to know who the real horses are in this race, and they're going to start putting their money on them. And Elizabeth Biden is going to be
Elizabeth
up for
Warren.
Elizabeth Warren. a conflation, a subliminal conflation. Elizabeth Warren, I think, she will have a rougher road to hoe, so to speak, once it becomes clear that they have to compete against her.
I think racism is going. Well, not say racism, but I think the isms are going to come into play here. The whole question about electability: can a woman beat Trump? That's why I'm saying with Mayor Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke, even though they're rising slowly, but they are rising in the polls.
But you guys are overlooking the obvious choice here, I think, for America will probably be Cory Booker.
I knew we were coming to that.
Pick it.
I knew we were coming to that.
Wait, pick it. Where
you
were
serious?
Wait, pick it.
Because-
Wait,
because-
I didn't ask you to
That
call.
was on that phone
Wait,
call.
pick it.
Wait,
Wait, let me finish my statement.
Let
Is
me
that
give
who
you
called
the
you?
call.
That's who
Is
was
that
on that
who
phone
called you?
call.
Yeah, that's
It
what-
was Booker
Yeah,
who called
pick
you.
it. Where were you 2 or 3 weeks ago when I went on the limb? You didn't back me, brother. I went on the limb and said that. I said that. I think
He
it's
certainly
all
did
about-
it, and
I said
and I came
Senator
at him.
Cory Booker.
I came at him.
Where
No
were you,
question.
brother? You didn't back me on that.
I came at him.
You didn't back. Where were you?
I was quietly listening.
I just don't want you to steal my idea. I don't want you to do Elizabeth Warren
Why
and I'm
not?
Bernie Sanders.
Why-
Sorry, come on,
Listen.
Bernie's ideas. Why not?
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm Bernie. He's Elizabeth. That's what I'm saying.
Quietly listening. Cory is
He's not resonating in the polls. I agree with you, Pickett, but he's not resonating in the polls.
He's
But
preaching-
Beto O'Rourke
he's
and
preaching some-
Buttigieg is.
He's preaching on some very reasonable issues, and his tack and his presentation, I think, are excellent. I think he has an opportunity once we get out of the way and get all these nominal candidates out of the way. He will shine.
He got to be able to stay in the race.
As Fatine said, but right now
Yeah.
he's not resonating. But to go back what Larry said, I do agree with you, Larry. And the American populace, they have a special. It's interesting, a special place in America's heart, for lack of a better term, for those who come out on the other side of adversity and obstacles. Remember Clinton in '92? Everyone thought he was done, and then he became the comeback kid.
That's what I'm saying.
He became the comeback kid. And so I do agree. And the same with Biden. If he can come out strongly on the other side of this Hunter Biden issue,
Right.
that bodes well for him. So I think you are absolutely right. I think Bernie and Biden are in the best positions right now, while Warren, she is still yet to be challenged.
Right.
And I think when that happens,
She's still in a good
that's,
position.
she's in a great position. But as Larry said, when the primaries may get closer and closer, and she is challenged more, and as Bobby said, particularly, by moderate Democrats who are, certainly going to have a strong say in who wins the nomination, then that's where we'll see who really has come out on the other side. But I do think Bernie and I do think Biden right now are in the best position because they have faced the most adversity. And so it remains to be seen how they come out of that.
So I know, Larry, you said you needed to go.
Is it 10:30?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
it
let's
is.
roll real quick. Shepard Smith, Fox News anchor, abruptly departs from the network this week. It surprised a lot of folks, even the folks at Fox News. I don't watch Fox News that much. I go across, so I'm not very familiar with Shepard Smith. But what I'm hearing of him.
Solid news guy, man.
Yeah, solid news, definitely.
He's been
Solid.
there since they started. So he's been there. He's been over the last 3 years. Pretty much a lone voice on that station.
No, Chris Wallace.
For the most part, right? Chris Wallace is a little late to the game. Chris Wallace has been doing this probably for the last 6 months or so, in calling out the inaccuracies of the president. Shepard Smith was doing it day one, and he's done that in previous administrations as well. Here's all you need to know. When the president talks about who his favorites are, he never mentions Shepard Smith, and he watches that station a lot out there. And what's happened recently is Smith has called out some of his other co-workers. So he has gone after
Did you say Tucker Carlson?
He's gone after
Exactly.
Tucker Carlson because
Exactly.
Carlson has gone to another level of extreme reporting. It's not even reporting. It's just made up stories.
He's to the right of Sean Hannity at this
Yeah,
point.
he is so far out there. And so Smith did it. So the reports are that he just got fed up with the direction of their call. Their line was fair and balanced news. So he tried to be the fair and balanced side, and they wanted to be everything else.
And then, Bobby, you need to point out that this came after Bill Barr met with Rupert Murdoch.
Right. Yeah. So all of a sudden now, he still is under contract, so he has a non-compete. But my guess will be there'll be a book coming out soon, once his contract's up, where he has nothing at risk financially, and he's just going to go tell the truth about what's been going on in that network.
Right. I didn't have this on the sheet, but somebody brought it up, and I scroll back to the person, but I thank you for mentioning it. They were mentioning that it was good that Spike and Tyler Perry buried their beef. I'm not familiar with that, but it did make me say, you know what? Let's bring up Tyler Perry's studio.
Mm-hmm.
He has one of the biggest studios out there when it comes down to putting films and things together.
It's fantastic. I visited it and had an opportunity for him to show me around about 6 months ago.
Okay.
When it was still in progress.
You was in
And,
Atlanta. Yes, you were.
Congratulations.
Absolutely.
Well, he's being attacked, Tyler Perry, because of the anti-abortion laws out there. And so, again, there's been a loud voice saying he should not have his studio
In Atlanta.
in that area, in that part of Georgia.
It's a huge facility.
He should think about it somewhere else. And he's
Huge.
basically saying no.
Done now.
And yeah, I mean, it's up and running. And so, he's not the first African American to own a studio, but
No.
he is the most successful one
Tim Reed.
to own
Tim Reed and
own
his
a
wife.
studio.
Huge facility.
And as some of the viewers have pointed out, it's another case of somebody trying to tell him how to spend his own money and run his business out there. So he can still support, go against the laws down there and still operate your business. That concept is just foreign to me. It's like, so you should remove your business from that area as opposed to fighting it from within. So kudos to him for having his studio there. I don't quite get why people would want him to shut it down and then move it to another state.
Remember, Georgia and the Atlanta area has become a premier location
Yeah.
for the film industry, and so from a standpoint of the tax, the taxes, tax breaks. So you're right. That is very interesting,
Yeah.
Bobby, that they would ask him to do that. But Georgia has become a premier location for the film
Yeah,
industry.
and the comment on Spike, Spike has always wanted to do the Spike Lee, and he's just never been able to maintain his studio, partly because he's wanted to do it here in Brooklyn, and the cost of doing that in Brooklyn versus the cost in a suburb in Georgia, it's a little bit different out there. So
Absolutely. And let me just say this: the Bronx, particularly where I have an apartment, right in the Grand Concourse area, that has become a premier location. And when I spoke to people, because it was messing up my parking for a while, I still have the apartment, but I live in another location.
Right.
I was told that the tax breaks that they're getting as opposed to filming in Manhattan. So you have major shows, movies who film and continue to film in that area. And so it is interesting how the Bronx is now becoming also a location where many of these production companies are filming.
Now, I
Well,
just want to do
Newark is becoming a premier location too.
this. Exactly.
They shot the Joker.
Yeah, that's right.
They shot the Joker.
Very true.
Yeah. I want to throw it to and get everyone's take, but I'm gonna throw it to the Sports Brothers to hit, of course, the baseball postseason. A little bit about where we had it in the football season here in the New York tri-state area. Also with the basketball season approaching us, and then we cannot not end the show without having a conversation about China and the NBA.
right.
Well, I want to start with China, and I
Right.
want to say, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is one of the most progressive, forward-thinking commissioners and sports commissioners in the history of this country, and so he was put in a very tough position. And I think Adam Silver handled himself admirably, and I want to commend him on that because it was, and it stemmed from the Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey commenting on what's taking place in China
Via Twitter.
okay? And he supported the protesters in Hong Kong. And as Adam Silver stated, we're not censoring, our general managers, our players. They have the freedom to,
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. But my issue with Maury is, you are the general manager of the Houston Rockets, the fourth largest city in America, which has a extremely large Latino Hispanic population. You have a president who said he wants to put alligators and snakes in the water to essentially murder those who are trying to come into this country and shoot them in the knees, and yet you don't comment on that. But you're commenting on what takes place over in China with really very little historical perspective and context.
Well, remember though, so I agree with what you're saying. So the connection between
With
the
Yao
Houston
Ming.
Rock, Yao Ming, and that's actually what opened the door for the NBA
No question.
and China, and so the Houston Rockets
No
have
question.
benefited
They're one
from
of the
that
most
relationship.
in China. They're one of the most popular franchises, the Houston Rockets.
So I can
Absolutely.
see Daryl Morey being sensitized to what's going on in Hong Kong. So he basically reinforced Hong Kong Rising in support of that. So I get his sensitivity based upon being around Yao Ming and others in that one.
Which is
but
fine.
your point is well taken. Where you live, every day, and you see this, you chose not to speak out against some of the other atrocities that are out there. So now it's become this major potential financial hit. There are reports that the Chinese-backed companies are so upset with the NBA and the Houston Rockets that they can pull back up to $25 million worth of deals that they had said, which would then have this trickle effect in the NBA, which is that's less basketball-related income that the league brings in. And if that happens to the league, then the salary caps that they pay the players will go down. So it has some domino effect. So this is why the governor of the team, of the Houston team, quickly went out and said, he expressed, this is not the views of the Houston Rockets. This is the views of an individual out there. And then Adam Silver came out with his statement. The Nets were playing in China when this was happening against the Los Angeles Lakers. They had 2 games out there. Now, the place still sold out. Basketball is huge in China, But now, once again, you have politics that are trying to merge with sports and politics trying to override it. And we've seen this through so many, go back in history, right? Jesse Owens in the Olympics, right? It became very political. But yet when Jesse came back home, no one really wanted to take care of Jesse, right? You saw it with John Carlos and Tommy Smith at the Olympics, and then how they were ostracized. You know, Mandela, when he was free, he talked about how sports was a unifying thing. So there's in the Olympics, the Los Angeles Olympics, when we shouldn't be doing certain things there, and when Carter pulled out from the '76 Olympics. So there's all this history where politics has interfered with sports when sports are intended to promote camaraderie, partnership, growth and development, and it just gets wiped out in these kind of moments.
And let me just add, and you mentioned the Nets. Well, Joe Tsai, who's recently the new owner of the Nets, who is Taiwanese, but he is also the executive vice chairman of Alibaba, which is one of the world's largest companies, obviously, Chinese company. So he was intimately involved with trying to bridge, and diffuse some of what took place. And so I think that, having him in that position was very important and very critical to Adam Silver and the NBA. And Bobby, everything you say is well stated. And I did speak to, someone in China who's very prominent there, who works closely with the NBA and has worked with NBA players. Certainly this is something that for both sides, it's going to be wise to work out because, Tencent, which streams and broadcasts the NBA games in China, that's the U.S.'s most lucrative or the NBA's most lucrative global partner. So there is a lot at stake. Certainly that's a very sensitive issue. But as Bobby said, we saw Trump use this as he did with Colin Kaepernick, the kneeling issue, the innocuous and silent protests to politicize it. So he used it to attack those who have been critical of him, like San Antonio Spurs coach Greg Popovich, Golden State coach Steve Kerr, ironically LeBron James, the Lakers owner, he's been very critical of Trump and his administration. So Trump immediately politicized that, and he used others. Fox News brought on, I'm not going to name this person because I don't really have any respect for him, but they brought on a black sportscaster who constantly is critical of black athletes and, black issues, and used him. And he had the audacity to say the players are being used when that fool was being used by Fox. To be critical of the players, and he knows nothing about what's going on in China. He doesn't have any historical perspective either. But so again, this is an issue that's been politicized, and for the NBA and the Chinese entities and the powers that be, it's going to be wise for them to come to a mutual agreement on which they will.
We call it.
Seems like Stephen A. Smith was trying to get into this the other day, and his partner, his co-host, cut the commercial because ESPN, tend to like to keep politics and sports separate.
Right. And they have a contract with the NBA where they broadcast the game, so they're not trying to introduce politics into sports. And it happens out there, but they did some censorship.
And let me say,
We call it Colin Kaepernick and how all this plays into it.
We call it politics,
Well,
as opposed to politics.
It's a more difficult path to resolution because China is not the United States. China, and I have great respect for China and its accomplishments, for the Chinese people, for the Chinese Revolution. But China is not the United States. China is not Great Britain. China is not Europe. In China, the Communist Party is in control.
Right.
They have a whole different, they have a different perspective, and they have a whole different set of rules and regulations regarding speech that we don't have in our country. So if you piss off the Communist Party of China, they will shut shit down.
Shut you down. Absolutely.
And when I said it,
I'm sorry, I said a bad word.
You said it right. Shut shit down.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
But you're absolutely right. But you're absolutely right.
They will shut off. They will shut off Google.
Almost a year.
They'll shut. When I say shut it off, I'm not speaking metaphorically.
Literally.
Shut off the internet. Shut off the television. Like in Hong Kong,
Shut
right?
it down.
They raising hell in Hong Kong. It's not broadcast on the mainland.
No.
Only the people in Hong Kong and the rest of the world know. The mainland, No, it's not in the newspapers. It's not on TV. So when the NBA goes head to head with the communist, it's not like going head to head here in the U.S.
It'll be Tyson Spinks.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be a 90
Yes.
second.
Well,
and
well,
let me just add this too.
And I really want to wrap up.
I'm
with
going to
some
wrap it up, but
sports.
almost a year ago to the day, I was in China, in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, where I'm doing
ahead.
business. And it's ironic you say that, Larry, because my partner in China, that's what he said. He said, listen, they will shut it down.
Yeah.
And that's the exact words he used to me. He said, they will shut it down. And they will. And we see that they have, because they shut down media access, the press conferences. And so that is absolutely the case. And let me just also give a shout out to Mark Tatum, who is the deputy commissioner of NBA, very good brother, who's doing a tremendous job with the NBA, but he's also heading, because he's overseeing NBA China. They report to him over there. So he has a lot at stake and a lot to say in this as well. So again, the NBA is doing, I think, really behind the scenes and publicly, a great job, because as Bobby said, this is a very difficult and sensitive
Yeah.
issue to navigate.
Share
So
with
just-
us,
just
share
to-
with us, if you don't mind, what your effort is in China.
Well, I have a sports technology venture that is moving forward, and thanks to this brother here who's been I'm gonna say it, who's been a huge supporter financially, just in terms of his knowledge, wisdom, and so we're moving forward. And I'm having a wonderful time and a wonderful experience, and have great partners. But the Americans are doing so much business in China.
Yes.
I mean, all the, you talk about every apparel company. So, our economies, as we know, are inextricably intertwined. And so it is, as Bobby said, just to restate, is a very sensitive and very difficult issue to navigate.
So just to close out this piece here. So what Larry and Jamie talked about. Now think about the trade war. I've said this before. You'll never win that trade war. The way the Communist Party operates, the way the Chinese government, they have a leader who is there until he dies. We have a president that
Who wants to be
hopefully
there.
will be gone next year.
He wants to be there until he dies.
You cannot win a fight that way. So, and the last thing I'll point out is you're going to start to hear stories over the next week or two about this new China trade deal, right? Don't believe the hype. It is basically a dusting off of something that already existed, and they're going to try to spin it as though, look, I got them to do something. It is nonsense. It is just like the NAFTA 2.0.
And,
So because China says I can play the long game, and they're going to win the long game.
all right, so let's do a little bit of sports on the other end of. Let's go football, basketball, and then baseball.
Giants, they lost.
Jets,
They all lost.
they-
That's
Jets
what
will lose to the Cowboys
Jets will
today.
lose today. Sam Darnold's back for the Jets. So hopefully their offense looks like a professional football team offense. They've been playing shorthanded with injuries in their third-string quarterback. The Giants, they lost Thursday night to New England. They were actually in the game for the first 3 1/3 quarters, and then the wheels just fell off. Daniel Jones going through the rookie phase of a quarterback through 3 interceptions, but he has made some nice passes. So they will have 10 days off now. They'll come back next week. And the true test will be, now that they got past the two biggest defensive teams, Minnesota and New England, now you get a chance to see where they really are. And then on the basketball front, preseason has started. As I said, Brooklyn is off to a good start.
Yes.
They've been in China. They look really good. A lot of energy around that team. A lot has been made about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. The person I'm most interested to see is Karis LeVert.
Yeah.
LeVert going into his third year, had a devastating injury last year, missed most of the season, came back at the end of the season. He is just chomping
Potential
at the
star.
bit to do this right.
Potential star.
And out there. And then the Knicks, they look good in their first preseason game.
And then play
They look very
Washington.
bad the next day, the next time they played them. It's too soon to say what you're going to have
That'll be
there.
a microclimate of the season, up and down. It'll look
Yep.
really good one night, next night. they'll struggle. And let me say this in honor of our dear brother Bob Slade. I know he's somewhat smiling because I do think, Fatine, that there will be another parade down the Canyons of Heroes.
I think so, too.
Coming into the season, I didn't want it to happen, but I said the Yankees, I predicted they would win the World Series. And they're showing, I think, that they're the most balanced team in baseball. And Masahiro Tanaka was brilliant last night. Quietly, he's becoming one of the great postseason pitchers in recent memory. He's like El Duque. No matter what they do during the regular season, when the postseason starts, they become a different pitcher. I mean, he's lights out last night, and I think the Yankees showed there's a lot of balance. And you got Giancarlo Stanton, who was warming up, and if he starts to hit, I think this team will be unstoppable.
Yeah, 2 hits last night. So just a last shout out to Taj Gibson, forward center of the Knicks. He's living out a childhood dream, playing for the Knicks. He's an 11-year veteran in the NBA. Went to born and raised in Brooklyn. Wears number 67 as his uniform number because that's the PS school that he went to, PS 67. So welcome to New York, Taj.
There you go. Welcome. And also, I just want to end on this note. We mentioned Bob Slade. If any new folks, Bob Slade is the one that created these talk shows here. And Bob was a Harlem, New York native. Bob was able to live his dream of helping others. And we all sitting here is an example of that.
Exactly.
The radio station, WBLS, wants to keep his vision of community through education alive by making a difference in a student's life by donating to the Bob Slade Scholarship Fund. Bob Slade studied journalism and communications at Queens College and was a prominent voice on African American radio here in New York City. He passed on March 23rd of this year, but his legacy will continue to live through us and continue to live through this scholarship. For more information about the scholarship and to contribute, please log on to the WBLS website, which is WBLS.com, as I said, for more information and to make a donation.
And just quickly, 10 seconds. As we know, Fatine, brother was a veteran of stage and theater.
Yes.
He loved to sing show tunes on the show. So Fatine has said, if the Yankees win the World Series in honor of Bob Slade, he's singing New York, New York right here. Right here. Right here.
When I get Jay-Z and Sister Girl to come through, we going to do it. I'll sing it if Frank Sinatra joins me.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, that ain't going to happen.
Pipe in the music.
There we go. There
Pipe
we
in
go.
there.
Well, that's it for this week. We had a good show, I think, on air and, of course, on the stream.
Excellent.
And Bobby Childs, close us out, my brother.
As Bob would always say, get your mind right and keep a good thought.
Have a
See
good
you next
Sunday.
week.
God bless.